Hello YouTubers, welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm your host, the Board Game Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing Grimslingers. Now Grimslingers was put out by Greenbrier Games, and Grimslingers it's got a couple of different modes. You can play the versus mode, which is 2 to 6 players, or the co-op mode, which is 1 to 4 players. Versus mode goes from 15 to 30 minutes, which is a very good estimate. And the co-op mode goes for about an hour. It says 60 to 90 minutes. I would only say you'd go over an hour, maybe the first or second time you played it, when you're really having to look things up in the rule book. That being said, that it says ages 14 and up, and now I often feel that these estimates are a bit high in age, but I think 14 and up is actually a good estimate for this. It is a bit of a more complicated game. It has a simplified version, which is really great to teach you how to play and learn your way up, but younger kids, this might be a little bit over their heads. Okay, so that being said, I've got this copy of Grimslingers. I've also got a copy of the starter Grimslingers Duels, and I bought a couple of extra packs of cards. I got all of these at Gen Con. Greenbrier Games was there at Gen Con. They were selling Grimslingers at Gen Con, along with these packs of extra cards that I believe to have been Kickstarter bonuses. They were also giving away copies of Grimslingers Duels, 1 per customer. There was a coupon in the book you got for showing up to Gen Con. So I've got everything that they've got for Grimslingers right now. I've got all of it, and I've played half a dozen games of it in the various modes, and I'm definitely ready to review it. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the theme of Grimslingers. It is a Wild West with magic and supernatural creatures theme. You've got the Grimslingers themselves are basically spell-casting gunslingers, which is kind of a cool name. You got Grimslingers instead of gunslingers because they're like gunslinging witches. And that's pretty great. The game, by the way, was, and I like that they did this, I think I wish more games would do this, they put it right on the cover, designed and illustrated by Stephen S. Gibson. I'm just going to show you that real quick. Now, obviously, since he did both the design and the illustrations really work well with the theme. I'm not too familiar with the Stephen S. Gibson, but I'm going to definitely look out for his things in the future. His artwork style is really cool. Let me show you some of his things here. These are some of his Grimslingers that you can play either when you're dueling or when you're going into co-op adventure mode to team up and attack the monsters and bad guys. So this is Alistair Quick. I like his illustration quite a bit. This is Ellie Blue Eyes. I'll show you Ellie Blue Eyes there. Gilgamesh. Again, these illustrations are really cool, and on the back you have the name of the Grimslinger and their storyline, which is just a bit fun. There's not actually rules-wise a difference between the Grimslinger, but there is a different deck of cards called archetypes that you can add to the Grimslinger to make the different Grimslingers different from each other. I'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. This is La Fleur Noire and the Professor. So there she is, the black flower, and the Professor is the bear with the glasses on. There's actually, in addition to lots of cool gunslinging-looking humans, there's a handful of intelligent magical animals that you can even be that are Grimslingers. Here's an example of one of those other than the Professor. This is Naunyo. Naunyo is a magical cat with a revolver who must use his magical powers to fire the revolver because he doesn't have opposable thumbs. So, there's some images of some of the Grimslingers you can get to use. Each Grimslinger gets a anima, which is a little steampunk magical robot that stores your magical energy for you. They're basically like a steampunk familiar, if you will. And they have some nice artwork too. They're two-sided. One side has the angry side and the other side has the normal side. The angry side has a different special ability than the normal side, so there's actually a game effect for both sides. And again, the artwork on those is very nice. Let me show you a few bad guys here. I've got some bad guys and monsters for when you're doing the co-op mode. This is the Witch King. Really nice illustration there. If you can't tell, I'm a big fan of this artwork. These are a group of standard bandits that you could run into in the Wild West. And then, because who doesn't love a jackalope? All right, so what do you get in each box? What's the difference between Grimslinger Duels and the full Grimslingers box? Well, the Grimslinger Duels is meant to be an introductory product to Grimslingers. Now, Grimslinger Duels gives you enough material to play the dual version, the basic dual version of the game. It doesn't play the advanced dual version of the game, and it can't play the co-op adventure mode. In here, you have just enough cards, like I said, for the basic dual mode. One reason to have this, though, in addition to regular Grimslingers, is that with this added to Grimslingers, the max number of players for versus mode goes from 6 to 8. So if you actually do want to play with a large number of people, either in like a team versus or a full free-for-all versus, this would help you with that. The other reason I find is that this has a couple of Grimslingers in it that are not in the base set. So just for artwork collectability, I'm not sorry I have this, because I do love the artwork and I like to have all the different Grimslingers so everybody has an option of what to play with. So that's a look at some of the components in Grimslingers. It also comes with a single 6-sided die, a meeple to move you around on the map in the adventure mode. It comes with, of course, all these different decks of cards. Here, let me show you an item. This is an item from the item deck, another really cool illustration. And let me show you a couple spells. The spells illustrations look like energy spheres, and you have these are signature spells. There are also basic spells of all the different elements like fire, water, ice, earth, wind. It comes with the board. Now, this board is just for the co-op adventure mode. When you're playing versus, this is strictly a card game of dueling it out with your opponent. But when you're going on the adventure mode, you use the meeple, and everybody discusses where they want to move to next. And we'll go into this in a little bit. Then, of course, it comes with your rule book, which explains all the modes of play, as well as a storybook. Now, this is the part for the adventure mode. There are many spaces on that board where it says turn to page whatever, and this is where you find what happens on that page whatever when you land on that space. So now I'm going to take you all to the table, and we're going to go through all 3, or 2.5 really, modes of play. I'm going to explain all of them. If you've already played this game and you're just interested in my opinion of it, feel free to fast forward the bar over to when you see me sitting at this table again, because that's when I'm going to be doing the actual review of Grimslingers. Because since I'm going to go through all the modes of play, the explanation might take a while. If you've never played it, maybe you want to watch and see how the game actually plays. So, here we go. Okay, so here's a setup for a basic duel in Grimslingers. As you can see, this is my Grimslinger. I chose to be this adorable little puppy with a longsword on his back because why wouldn't you want to be him? And here is his anima. Now, during a duel, these go on top of a health tracker, starting with 10 health, and a energy tracker. It's your magic energy, starting at 10 energy, so that the cards actually have a function there to keep track of your health and energy. Here's my opponent's Grimslinger and Anima. We each have a hand of cards, which our cards are made up of the same cards. We have our basic elemental magic cards. So in this case, that is wind, water, lightning, ice, fire, and earth. We know what the opponent has because they have the same things we do at the start, but we keep it in a hand that they can't see because when we choose which spell to play, we don't want them to know what spell we're playing. Finally, over here, we have the Get Lucky or Die Trying deck. Now this is some regular playing card-like cards that only go from 1 or ace up to 5. There are 2 copies of each, and I will explain what that's for in just a moment. So, now on your turn you have 3 phases. The first phase is known as the standoff phase. Now, during the standoff, you have a few different actions you can take in the basic duel. The first action is that you're allowed to sacrifice hit points to regenerate your energy points. It's at a 1-to-1 basis, but you can't use it to kill yourself, and you can't get energy points if you're already full. The next ability is that on your anima card, he has two abilities that you can pick only one of to do on your turn if you choose. And these are either the Reload ability, which allows you to put 4 discarded spells back in your hand, and it costs you 3 energy points to do it. And there's the Purge ability, which allows you to discard up to 2 spells to gain 1 energy point each. You can only do one of those on any given turn. They kind of are opposites, so you wouldn't want to do both of them anyway. It would be a little counterintuitive. Then the final thing you do once you've decided whether or not you're going to do any of these 3 things is you say you're ready. There are no turns really in Grimslingers. It's more a simultaneous thing. So you and your opponent can decide to do these actions, and you're not taking turns doing them. You just decide if you want to do them until everybody says ready. You just have to announce them out loud that you're doing them. So you say to your opponent, you say, you know what, I'm running low on cards. I'm going to do the Reload ability. You spend the points, and you get to get cards back from your discard pile. Now, once both you and your opponent say ready, you move on to phase 2, which is the draw. Now, in the draw, it's fairly simple. You're going to choose, in the basic game, what elemental spell you're going to use on your opponent. So you're going to look at your hand here, and you're going to look at what they do. This, for instance, Wind says it gives 1 damage to your opponent, and they have to deactivate 3 cards, so that has a nice card attack effect, whereas other things like Lightning are more damaging. It says target takes 3 damage, but then they gain 1 energy point. So you're going to pick one of these to play, and you're going to put it face down on the table, which signifies that you're ready to go. Now, your opponent will do the same. They're going to pick a card and put it face down, and obviously you don't know what card you're playing against each other. So, once both of them are down, if you need to, you can decide to pass. And if you do that, you take your card you put face down back in your hand, and you say, I pass, once everybody's put their cards face down, and you will gain 2 energy points back. If you don't pass, because that doesn't actually happen that often, but if you don't pass, you just check that everybody's ready. You say, ready, ready, and then in a very thematic, kind of quick draw feel, you both say, someone yells, draw! And you both flip your card over, and you see what you got. So now we got Lightning versus Water. So at the top of the card, right underneath Lightning here, it says, Lightning beats Water, Earth beats Lightning. So in this case, you with the basic spells, you have kind of this rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock type thing, because there's actually enough cards for that sort of level of interaction. Lightning beats Water, so what happens is Water automatically gets discarded and does not take effect. It goes into the discard pile there. Lightning will take effect, and it's going to do 3 damage to my opponent, knocking them down 10, 9, 8, 7 to 7 life. And they would gain 1 energy point, but as they're full, that doesn't do anything. Now, the discard pile goes next to your cards here. However, some cards, like the Wind card, says it causes cards to become deactive. If cards go deactive, you put them sideways next to the discard pile. And that is to symbolize that these are deactive cards, these are discarded cards. Now, when you're done with the draw, you have the aftermath phase where the actual effects of the cards do take effect. So I inadvertently jumped into the aftermath phase there. In addition, the first thing you do during the aftermath phase is any deactivated cards that were deactivated on a previous turn, as long as, again, previous turn, I get to pull them up and put them back in my hand. Discarded cards stay there. Then you get to resolve the actual card effects. Now, in case you didn't have 2 cards that automatically canceled each other out. So let's say on a future turn, I threw down this card here. My opponent throws down, let's see, this card here. And we say draw, and we flip them over, and it's fire and lightning. Now on fire, we can see that fire beats ice, wind beats fire. And on lightning, we can see that lightning beats water, earth beats lightning. Well, fire and lightning have no interaction. So in this case, with basic element spells, who happen at the same time, to decide what happens, we use the Get Lucky or Die Trying deck over here, the number deck. Now, the way this works is we start by dealing one card to each player. And in this case, we see I got a 3, my opponent got a 1. The person with the higher number goes first. And this plays very similar to blackjack. You want to get as close to the number 11, not 21, because we're playing with a much lower number deck here. You want to get as close to the number 11 as possible. Actually getting the number 11 is called an apex, and going over 11 is called becoming exhausted and is very bad. So I decide, I go first. I have a 3. I'm going to say, I'm going to take another one. So now I have a 4. Now it's my opponent's turn. They have a 1. They're going to take another one also. So now they have 6. So now it's my turn. I go from 4 to 9. That's getting a little scary. I don't want to go over. My opponent's got 6. He calls. He goes up to 8. I'm still above, so I'm going to pass. My opponent is at 8. They want to be above, so they're going to call again. 8, 9, 10. Wow. Both ones are out, though. If they were to draw again, they'll go over, so they're definitely not going to. Now, the decision, and I'm going to live dangerously this time, is mine, and I'm going to draw, and I went over and got exhausted. Now, here's how this works. If you lose this, in this case I lost, your card gets discarded and the other's going to take effect. If you apex, you get exactly 11 for your score. You get +1 damage to your spell. If your opponent exhausts, you get to double the damage for your spell. So in this case, he did not apex, so he doesn't go from 3 to 4, but I did exhaust, so he goes from 3 to 6. So he's actually going to do 6 damage to me, which is devastating. I go all the way down to 4 health. Terrible. Now, if you apex and your opponent exhausts, you add the apex in before doubling, which means actually this could have been as much as 8 damage, which would have been truly, truly brutal. Once you're done with that, to find out whose spell takes effect, you of course reshuffle that deck for future use. Now, this is the basic way that a basic duel works. You go back and forth, playing cards, discarding them, doing the abilities to get cards back, until someone loses and there's only one man standing. Now, for the more advanced version of Duel, there are 3 optional rules that you choose which ones you're going to add in. The first one, which is almost certain that you're going to add in, is signature spells. This is the signature spell deck. It contains lots of other interesting spells that do other interesting things. And with these spells, these don't work like the basic spells where they do the rock, paper, scissors situation. Instead, they just have specific effects that may include damage or may include messing with your opponent's cards or both. Now, there are 2 ways you can do this. If you know the cards well, you can look through the deck, pick 2 cards, give it to your opponent, they pick 2 cards, and you go. The other way to do it, if you don't know it very well or you don't want to take the time to pick the cards, is you can shuffle it up and simply randomly deal off the top 2 cards to your opponent, 2 cards to you. So let's give my opponent 2 cards and me 2 cards. Then you take a look at them and you see what you got. I've done it this way and I like it. I like getting the random cards. So now I have a dark card, which actually works like a basic element card, except that it's beaten by all elements, but it has a trick. It says, if this card is beaten by another, then the enemy card will heal the target instead of damaging it. That's a pretty nasty trick. Then I've got a barrier card here. Now this one says reduce all incoming damage by 3 for the rest of this turn. This is a nice defensive card. Now, once you start playing with special cards, you'll notice, if you can make it out here, there's a number in the bottom left corner. The number on this card is a 2 in case you can't see it. The number on the basic element cards is a 9. You go from 1 to 10 in order. So this barrier is going to go into effect before most other cards because it's got a 2 for its resolution number there. That's the term they use, resolution number. It's basically like initiative. My opponent randomly drew a transmute, which says this phase all incoming damage will instead give you the same amount in your choice of either hit points or energy points. Again, a nice defensive card. And he got Scourge. The foe will lose 1 hit point at the start of every standoff phase until they receive hit points from a card's effect. So this is like poisoning your opponent and slowly picking away at their life. Now that's the first thing that you get when you go into full duel mode, and that's the thing that's almost guaranteed that you're probably going to use. The other two are very optional. The first of the other two, which I like a lot, is an artifact deck. You get to add in an extra deck of cards that are artifacts. Now with the artifacts, what you do is, for the, or items actually, item deck. For the item deck, what you do is you have an extra action that you can take during the first phase, the standoff phase, and that action is you can draw an item card. If you do this, you're not allowed to do the other types of actions on the anima card over here. Once you draw an item card, the only other actions you're allowed to do is play an item, if you're allowed to do it during the standoff phase, or do a archetype ability, which I'll get to in a second. That is the third optional rule for a full duel. Now, if I draw an item card, let's say I get here a Bullwhip. This is an interesting card because this allows me to play it instead of a spell. It does 2 damage, and I get to return it to my hand. It doesn't discard. There are some cool item cards like that that let you do things like that. There's also, I'm just going to take a quick look to find some, there's some item cards in here that let you do lots of very interesting things. Some of my favorites include ones that allow you to combine them with other spells to do more damage or more effect. Now, here's one of those. This is a Bottle of Absinthe. Now, Bottle of Absinthe says, play this card with the fire spell, and it gives +1 damage, or you can use it during the standoff to gain 2 energy points. So during the standoff, you could use this to replenish energy by drinking it, or during the duel, you can play it along with your fire spell. You take both of them. Your opponent obviously knows you're combining cards, but they don't know what you're combining, because there are some combined cards that can help you gain health, while there are others that help you do extra damage. And when you flip them over, it's like first I douse you in alcohol, then I light you on fire, and I get to do extra damage, and that's really, really cool. Now, the third optional rule that you can use when doing these more advanced duels is the archetypes. Now, the archetype deck has lots of interesting different archetypes, and what these do is they give you a different, rather than 10 and 10, a different starting hit points and energy points, and they also give you a special ability. Now, on our first attempt to do a duel with the archetypes, my wife and I both chose defensive archetypes and found that with us both using defensive archetypes, we were both very, very difficult to kill, and it drew out the duel too long. So we decided, and this is one of the great things of this game, is that everything is optional, that our favorite way to play when we do a duel is with the signature spells and the items, but we don't use the archetypes ourselves. If you disagree and you like the archetypes, you can go right ahead. Okay, we're going to come right back, and I'm going to show you how to play the adventure. Okay, so here is the setup for the co-op adventure mode in Grimslingers. So the first thing you will notice is that we're no longer on opposite sides of the table from each other, because we're not opponents in a duel anymore. We're teammates, and we're teaming up to take on the evil monsters and villains of the wasteland, including and eventually killing the Witch King. So we set up in a similar manner to how we did in a duel, including a hand of all the basic spell cards. We also have our Grimslinger card on a health tracker and our anima card on an energy tracker, but then we also have to, and this is very important for this mode, have to choose a archetype, and I find the archetypes work much better in this mode than they do in the duels, and the archetype goes over a level tracker, and this is important because you actually get to go up levels, and as you go up levels, you get extra points of hit points, energy points, new cards, new items, new spells, all sorts of cool things, and it feels really rewarding to do so. So we're both set up here. Now the archetype also, on the back of the archetype, I'll show you here on Hell's Fury, On the back of the archetype, it gives you a starting hit points and energy points of 9 and 8, which is why we are now at 9 and 8. That is also, for the adventure mode, your max for that, unless you get something while leveling up that allows you to up your max hit points or energy points. The level trackers are two-sided because after you hit level 10, you can flip it over. It has a summary on the bottom of all the things you get for levels 1 through 11, and then you can go all the way up to level 20. So there you are. That's the basic setup for the 2 players. Now, if you look out here, you have a little bit more intimidating looking setup of the rest of the game for co-op. You've got the board in the middle, and I've placed the meeple on the starting location for the first chapter of the story, which is Valley Haven. And it has a mark that page 19 is where you turn to for what happens at Valley Haven. You've also got your artifact deck over here with extra cards added in specifically for the adventure mode that aren't played in Duels. You have the signature spell deck face up, because every time you get a signature spell, you get to choose it. You get to go through and choose it. There's a couple of an ally and a weapon special card that you don't get normally. You need special circumstances to get them here. You have, of course, your number deck there. There's an event deck here for when you land on an event space on the map, which I say land, but you choose to go there. Of course, you have your die, because your die is going to be necessary. Over here, this large number of decks that really makes this look intimidating is not so intimidating. What these basically are is these are the bad guys you're going to run into. So, for instance, you've got a Chupacabra, a Phantom, a Peyote Scorpion, a Worm, a Jackalope, and some Bandits. Now, underneath the card here are the action cards that they get to use when you're dueling them. If you pick this card up, it tells you, depending on how many players you're playing, how many hit points and energy points they get to start with. So we have 2 players. He starts with 9 hit points and 8 energy points. When we run into him in a duel, we take these trackers from here, and we set him to 9 hit points and 8 energy points. So we go 9, point that at the little arrow, and then we go 8, and point that at the other arrow. Now, in a basic difficulty game, because this actually has multiple difficulties you can choose from, but I'm going to be talking about standard difficulty for the purposes of this instructional, you take 1 creature modifier from the top of the deck and add it to the creature. In this case, he is an undead bandit. Oh my. If he gets to 0 hit points at the end of the aftermath phase, he will gain +1 hit points unless the damage is from the effects of a fire spell. So you need fire to kill this guy because he's undead. So you got to save a fire spell for the final coffin nail there. Pretty nasty. Then we take the bandit's action cards plus the general creature action skill cards here, and we shuffle them together, and we wind up with a deck of cards that he gets to use. Instead of choosing spells, he randomly is going to throw one of these at us. The duels work fairly normally, like you would do in a duel with an opponent, except that you're, again, doing a random chosen one from here. Everybody else chooses one from here, so I'm going to throw a wind at him. My teammate is going to throw water at him, because we're saving our fires to kill him, because he's undead. And then we flip all over and we see what happens. So now he has initiative 9, which means he's going to go at the same speed as our initiative 9 cards. And he has a thing called Frenzy, which says all foes take damage. Any foe may pay 3 energy points to dodge this attack and avoid taking that damage. Now, if we have the same initiative, but he's not using a basic elemental spell, we roll off to see who goes first. So we rolled a 6. He rolled a 6. We roll again. 3 and 1. So we get to go first. We hit him with our effects first, and then he hits us with that one. And that's how a duel basically goes in this. It keeps going back and forth again until somebody is dead, hopefully the bad guy. Now, with the bad guy, though, when he's doing the duel, again, he gets his discard card next to his deck here. He gets his deactivated card over here, just like we do, turned sideways to mark it off.
he needs to, if he runs out of skill cards in his hand, he can spend his energy points, which he has to do when he runs out, to put that many discarded skill cards back in his hand. He will not put himself to 0 energy points doing this, but he does have to take the most he can do. But if he's got all of these discarded and he's only got 2 energy points left, you'll turn it over, shuffle it up, and take a random 2 to put back. Another thing that he's got to do is another thing that you can do that's a little different in this duel is that if you and your opponent are losing, you can agree to run away. You don't get any of the benefits from defeating him, but you can escape, which, you know, is better than dying. Now, in this adventure mode, you have a maximum hand size. Your maximum hand size starts at 7, which is 1 more than your total basic spells. If you get any more cards than that, signature spells, items, etc., you can put them in your stash over here, face down, next to your play area. During certain parts of the game, you're allowed to look in your stash. In the advanced duel, for instance, you used to be able to draw an artifact card during the standoff phase. Now, you don't get to do that in the adventure because artifacts are reserved as rewards for killing bad guys and finding them as loot. Instead, it works just about the same way that you get to exchange cards with your stash. So instead of drawing from the artifact deck, you pick up your stash, you figure out which card you want, you can put it in your hand, and if that would make you have too many cards in your hand, you can put other cards from your hand back in your stash. Also, at rest points, you get to exchange cards with your stash, and sometimes during specific events when they happen. So that's the gist of how a duel works against the bad guy monsters here. When you kill this particular bad guy, these undead bandits, he says players may draw the Human Heart Ritual item card from the item deck, and each player also gains 1 level and may draw 1 random item from the deck. So for killing him, you get a lot of stuff. You get to go up a level, which is always good, and on our second level, we get a max hand size increased by 1, which is very useful. We get to get a random item. So here is the discarded artifact. It's not a very good item, but I got it. And then I get to search the deck, and we can give it to one of the people on our team, the Human Heart item. A little bit gruesome. So that is how a duel works in the adventure co-op mode. Now we put these back here, and I'm going to show you how the actual game works. So during the adventure mode, you have a few phases that you have to go through just like you do in a duel. Here we go. Okay, so the first phase in they call it the tall tale mode. The first phase in the tall tale mode is the narrative phase. So what you do in the narrative phase is you check the prerequisites in the current story you're playing in the story booklet. You check the prerequisites for the next part of the story. You see if you've met them. If you haven't, you just keep playing. If you have, you get to go on to the next part of the story. Then, in the next phase is the node resolution phase, where whatever node you're on, you get to do what that node is for. So to take a quick look at the nodes over here, you have 4 kinds of nodes. You have rest nodes, which are what they sound like. I'll explain them in a minute, but they help you to recuperate. You have event nodes, where you draw an event deck over here, and the peril awaits the damned deck up there. The events can be good, can be bad, you don't really know. You have these red X's, which are attack locations. When you land on one of them, you roll a die, and you see what attacks you. And over in this case, that would be a specter. Just like I showed you with the duel with the undead bandit there, we would get a specter, would give him a random ability, would give him his cards, and we'd have to fight him. The final kind of space are the landmarks. Now these are the blue stars. They're 5-pointed stars with a circle around them. They tell you what the landmark is, and it tells you what page to turn to in the storybook to see what happens. So you do what happens on the location you are on. So in this case, we would start with the prerequisite. The prerequisite for Chapter 1 is to be on the Valley Haven map node. We'd be there. We'd read what would happen. We get to do some storyline actions and whatnot as we get our quest on the Valley Haven map node. Then we get to move on to the node resolution, where we actually go to the Valley Haven map node, and we get there. It's a nice little place where we get to rest and possibly buy items. Then we move on to the movement phase. Now, our next part of the quest requires us to have successfully resolved one attack node or one event node. Now, we can do any attack node or event node, we just have to successfully get through one. So as a group, we'll discuss, and we have lots of event nodes and attack nodes, and we're not really sure which way we're going yet. So we discuss and we say, you know what, let's do an event node. So we'd move, let's say, to that event node there. Then we would draw the event card for landing on the event node. And in this case, we have the event Death from Above. Players take turns choosing an action. Action 1 is to discard enough spells that if played would deal a total of 5 damage, and the creature that is attacking us will leave us alone. Action 2 is to draw a number card until left alone, which you draw 1. The creature sweeps down, grabbing you and throwing you several feet, and you would take 2 damage. If you draw a 2, 3, or 4, it drops bombs on you, and you can pay 1 energy point to dodge them or get hit and lose a hit point. And then if you draw 5, the creature will go away and leave you alone. So you decide, do you want to discard spells, or do you want to go for luck of the draw to get away from this giant flying monster that's throwing bombs at you? Now that was obviously a bad event, but some of them are good every once in a while. You don't always know what to expect from the event deck. Once you solve that, you have gone on to the next part of the story. So you get to read that, and you get to take the actions that it gives you, and then you get to look to where you have to go next. And the next part after that is you have to get on the Lone Titan map point, which is over here. So first we would go back to Haven. It acts kind of like a big rest node. We get to rest and possibly buy items. Then we're going to probably move on here and fight some random monster, and then we get to move on to the Lone Titan. And again, we read the next part of the story and find out where we have to go from there. There are the main story parts are on rails. They are specific stories. You don't really have too much in the way of choices on where to go with those, though they are very characterful and they're fun to read aloud and see what happens when you get there. Your main choices have to do with how you get to each location. As you can see on this map, there are always multiple choices to get from point A to point B, and some of them involve more or less danger. For instance, if I was on Jezebel Bridge and I needed to go to the King's Altar, you can see first I would move to a rest point, which would be nice because I could, at the rest point, you can do a few things that really help you to recoup and get ready for a fight. Specifically, you can do either the reload or purge ability for free. You can reorganize your hand with your stash, and you can trade item cards with teammates, and then you can use any item card that says it is a standoff type item card. So, plus every time you land on on one of these points, one of these rest points, you automatically get to, I believe, heal and get energy back. I'm going to just take a look in the book here to verify. Yes, you get 2 hit points and 2 energy points back automatically for landing on it, which is, again, very useful if you've been doing a lot of fighting of bad guys and monsters. But from here, we have 3 choices. We could go to the right, which would mean 2 events before hitting the King's Altar. We could go straight ahead, which would mean 1 fight before hitting King's Altar. Or we could go to the left, which would mean 1 event and 1 fight. So the decision is, do you want to risk more things to possibly get more rewards and more levels? Or do you just want to take the quickest route, which is just 1 fight? Or do you want to take a route that is no fights and either get some really bad events or maybe even some really good events? You're not really sure. And the decision is yours and your teammates, and you discuss it. And that is how the adventure mode plays. So let's go back to the table. Now that we've shown all 3 modes, we'll go back to the table and I'll tell you.
Okay, so we're back. And that's the gist of how you play every mode of Grimslingers. So let's talk a little bit about how the game feels, how the game plays, and what the game looks like. So first off, I've already touched on the fact that I really like the artwork in this game, and I like the style of the game. And I want to say that again because I want you to understand how much I like it. Now, artwork isn't important for the play of the game, but it does help you to get into the right mindset. It helps to make you absorbed by the game, and this game's artwork is fantastic at that. I love the artwork. I can't stress it enough. The gameplay itself works really well. The thematic play of having simultaneous play and then shouting draw and flipping cards over for the quick draw of your Grimslingers is really, really cool, and it really feels like it should feel for the theme of the game. The best part of this game is that there is something for everyone. You've got a very generous game designer gave you multiple ways to play this game. So, do you like dueling with your opponents in games similar to Magic the Gathering and other collectible card games? It's got you covered. Do you not like that? Do you prefer to go on adventures and adventure games, or RPG light type games, like say the old Hero Quest game, or more recently the Pathfinder adventure card game? It's got you covered for that too. Do you like all of these things? Then you're going to be very happy, like I am, because it's got you covered in all of those areas. Also, one of the greatest things about this is how many optional rules there are for the duels, because when you're dueling, it feels like a toolbox in that you can take what you want to make the game work for you. Do you really like archetypes? Use them. Do you not like archetypes? Don't use them. And in that regard, a lot of the things that I could say negative about this game are completely wiped away by the fact that they're optional. So, I don't like the archetypes in Duels. I love them in the storyline mode because they are very useful and very characterful in the adventure mode, but in the Duels, I'm not a fan of them. But they're optional in the Duels, so I don't use them, and that's beautiful. This is an incredibly generous game by an incredibly generous game designer. I love this game. On BoardGameGeek.com, I gave this game 9 out of 10 stars. It is a fantastic game. I really enjoy it. I would play it anytime, as long as I'm not playing with very much beginning gamers. Beginning gamers are the only people I think... with beginning gamers, with people who aren't as advanced, you could play the basic duel version of this and they would be fine. The more advanced versions, you would have to build them up for it. Even with kids, you could play the basic duel version with kids to help them graduate slowly into more advanced games. But the more advanced duels and very much so the adventure portion is really more for advanced gamers. So again, it may not be for... Every mode in the game may not be for everyone, but that being said, this game feels like it was tailor designed for me because it has multiple modes that I like to play. It has lots of optional rules, that some of which I like to use, and others, if I don't, they're completely optional. I love this game. So 9 out of 10 stars, man. I really, really love this game. I would play this with anyone who wanted to play this game with me. But let's get a second opinion. Lynn, how many stars out of 10 would you give to Grimslingers?
7.
So Lynn gave it 7 stars. Now, she didn't love it as much as I did. 7 is still a positive rating. It means that she very much liked the game and would be ready to play it just about any time someone else asked to play it. So still a positive rating, but a couple points below where I was. So there you have it. I give Grimslingers a 9. Absolutely adore this game, but again, not everybody agrees on games, and Lynn gave it a 7. Still a positive review, still thumbs up, but not as highly up as mine. That being said, I really hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed it almost as much as I enjoyed playing the game. Do you have any comments, any suggestions, any questions? Please write them down below. And if you enjoyed this review and you'd like to see more like it, like and subscribe here on YouTube. I will try to keep the number of reviews going. I like to do about 2 videos a week, and those views and those likes and those subscribes keep me going. So until next time, game on.